It started out like any other morning. I was still groggy when I got up, wiping the sleep from my eyes, trying to find my bearings as I stood in the kitchen. The coffee pot was bubbling, the smell of it already filling the house, and I felt that strange comfort that I had grown to rely on. It was the same routine, the same morning, the same motions. And then there was Sarah. I glanced at the clock on the wall, 7:15 a.m. She was usually up before me, a habit I had come to admire. But today, the house felt quieter, maybe a little too quiet. I didn't think much of it at first. She was probably still in bed, curled up with a book or lost in the warmth of the covers. The thing about Sarah is, she's never been a morning person. But once she's up, she's usually alert, always ready to start the day. So, I found it odd that I hadn't heard her stirring. I called out for her, like I always did. No response. Maybe she went for an early walk. She did that sometimes, to clear her head. But the silence felt different today, like the air itself was holding its breath. I poured myself a cup of coffee and wandered into the living room, hoping to see her on the couch, flipping through a magazine, or maybe scrolling on her phone. But the room was empty. I glanced at the back door, half expecting to see it ajar, the way it sometimes was when she decided to get out early for some fresh air. But it was locked tight. Something gnawed at me. It was subtle at first, a vague sense of unease, but the more I tried to dismiss it, the more persistent it became. I shrugged it off, convinced it was nothing more than my imagination running wild. But when I walked past our bedroom, I paused. The door was closed. The closed door. That's when I felt the first flicker of doubt. It wasn't that Sarah was secretive or distant. In fact, she was the opposite. She had always been an open book, her emotions as clear as day, but there was something about the way the door was shut, like it was hiding something. I knocked softly, more out of habit than anything else. "Sarah?" I called. You in there?" No answer. I knocked again, a little louder this time, but still nothing. My heart skipped a beat, a strange rhythm in my chest. I turned the handle and pushed the door open, not really expecting her to be inside, but hoping she was. The room was dark, the curtains drawn tight against the morning light. It took a moment for my eyes to adjust, but when they did, I saw the bed, empty. The covers were tossed aside, the pillows slightly out of place, like someone had gotten up quickly in the night. That wasn't like Sarah. She never left the bed a mess unless something had caught her off guard. It wasn't just the mess that unsettled me. It was the smell. It was faint, but it was there, a trace of something sweet, something floral, not the usual scent she wore, but something different. My brow furrowed, and I felt my stomach twist. It wasn't just a bad feeling anymore. Something was wrong, and I couldn't put my finger on it. I walked to her side of the bed and picked up a small object that had been left there. A hair tie. But it wasn't hers. I recognized it immediately. It was a simple black band, the kind you could find in almost any store, but it wasn't something Sarah wore. She had her own set of hair ties, the ones she liked. A little more stylish, a little more her. This one was different. It didn't belong to her. For a moment I stood there frozen. I could feel the weight of that small, insignificant item pressing down on me, its meaning slipping out of reach, but never quite leaving my mind. The hair tie wasn't a smoking gun. It wasn't even proof of anything, but in that moment, I felt the first crack in the foundation of my trust. And then, just as suddenly, it was gone. But not entirely. Modifications. I stood there in our bedroom, staring at the hair tie in my hand, trying to make sense of it. The room was still quiet, almost too quiet. I could hear the faint sound of the coffee brewing in the kitchen, but it felt distant, like I was disconnected from the world. My fingers tightened around the hair tie, but I didn't know what to do with it. It felt out of place in my grip, like a puzzle piece that didn't belong in the image I thought I knew. I set it down carefully on the nightstand and walked out of the room, my mind racing. The unease from earlier hadn't gone away. In fact, it was only getting worse. I tried to shake it off, but the thought of that hair tie kept gnawing at the edges of my thoughts. Whose was it? Why was it in our bed? I couldn't help but imagine the possibilities. Maybe it was just a mistake. Maybe Sarah had borrowed it from a friend or had picked it up without realizing. But the more I thought about it, the more unlikely that seemed. It didn't make sense. I went back into the kitchen, and for a moment I just stood there, watching the coffee drip into the carafe, trying to steady myself. The rhythm of the coffee maker was calming, but the questions kept swirling. Sarah had always been so meticulous, so organized. She wasn't the type to leave a stray hair tie lying around, especially in a place like that. It felt too deliberate, too careless at the same time. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was missing something. The house still felt off, and then I remembered. Her phone. I had never been the type to snoop through Sarah's things. I trusted her, Trust had never been an issue in our marriage. We had built a life together, a solid foundation of honesty and understanding. But that foundation felt fragile now, like the slightest pressure would cause it to crumble. I had no right to go through her phone, but in that moment, I couldn't stop myself. I grabbed it off the counter where it had been charging the night before. The screen lit up as I picked it up, revealing a lock screen I didn't recognize. It was a photo of Sarah, but not one I'd ever seen. It was from a trip we had taken to the coast, but she wasn't alone in the picture. There was someone with her, standing just behind her. A man. His arm was casually draped over her shoulder, and they were both smiling, like they were in on some secret that I wasn't. I felt a jolt in my chest, a sharp pang of confusion. Who was this guy? My thumb hovered over the screen, hesitating. I didn't want to do this, didn't want to intrude on her privacy, but the unease had morphed into something sharper, something I couldn't ignore. I had to know. I unlocked the phone. There was a flood of messages. I tried to focus, tried to sift through them quickly, but my heart was pounding in my ears, and the screen blurred before my eyes. I clicked on the message thread with the man from the photo. His name was Eli. I didn't recognize it. The messages were casual at first, friendly. There were a few back-and-forth exchanges about some event they had attended together, a show or a gallery, but nothing particularly alarming. I scrolled through, my breath catching in my throat as I read each line, each word, and then I found something that made my stomach drop. A message sent the night before, around midnight. I miss you already. Can't wait to see you again. I froze. My thumb hovered above the screen as I reread it. There was no context to it, no explanation, just a simple, intimate statement. It felt wrong. It felt like I was reading something I shouldn't be, something personal. But the worst part was the absence of any indication that it was anything out of the ordinary to Sarah. There was no, hey, love you, or can't wait to see you too. Just a simple message that felt so out of place. Who was this guy, and why was she texting him like this? Was I missing something? I couldn't breathe. I set the phone down quickly, my mind spinning. My gut was telling me one thing, but I didn't want to believe it. I didn't want to believe that Sarah, my Sarah, was keeping something from me. But the pieces were starting to fall into place, and they didn't make sense. Not with the hair tie, not with the strange messages, and certainly not with the photo. The man, Eli, was a mystery. I had no idea who he was or what he meant to her, but there was something undeniably intimate about the way they communicated. And that sent a ripple of doubt through my entire being. I needed answers. I couldn't keep pretending that everything was fine when it felt like the walls around me were closing in. But where did I even start? What was I supposed to do now? The rest of the morning passed in a blur. I went through the motions, eating breakfast, drinking coffee, trying to shake the sense of unease, but I couldn't focus. My mind was consumed with the photo of Sarah and Eli. It kept replaying in my mind, and I couldn't shake the thought of him standing so close to her, his arm around her, the way they looked at each other. I couldn't stop thinking about it. The strangest thing was, I wasn't angry yet, just confused and scared. The whole thing felt surreal. How could Sarah, my Sarah, be hiding something from me? Was this just a silly fling, or something more serious? I didn't know. I needed to talk to her, but how do you bring something like this up? How do you ask, who's Eli, and why are you texting him like that, without sounding paranoid? As if on cue, I heard the door creak open. My heart skipped. It was Sarah. I could hear her footsteps in the hallway, light and casual. I should have said something, but I couldn't find the words. My chest was tight, my mind racing, and the silence between us felt unbearable. She appeared in the kitchen doorway, a smile spreading across her face. "Hey, babe," she said, as if nothing was wrong. For a moment, I almost convinced myself that I was imagining everything. Maybe the hair tie was nothing, maybe Eli was just some guy she knew. But then I remembered the texts, the photo, the unease that had settled in my gut. "Where were you this morning?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. She paused, clearly surprised by the question. "I was just out for a walk. Why?" Her answer was simple, too simple. I nodded slowly, but something felt off. "You weren't in bed when I woke up," I said, trying to sound casual. She laughed lightly, brushing her hair back. "Oh, I got up early. You know how I like to get outside before the day gets started." I couldn't shake the feeling that she was being evasive. The response felt rehearsed, like she was saying what she thought I wanted to hear. But I didn't press. Not yet. I tried to regain my composure, but then it all spilled out. "Who's Eli?" Her face shifted, just slightly, but it didn't go unnoticed. "What do you mean?" she asked, her voice a little too high, like she was trying to play it off. "Eli, who is he? Why are you texting him like that?" The silence between us stretched out, thick with tension. I could see the shift in her eyes, the way she suddenly seemed to shrink in on herself. She wasn't as relaxed as she usually was. "I don't know what you're talking about," she said, her voice quieter now. "I didn't buy it. I saw the messages, Sarah. The photo. Don't lie to me." Her face went pale. She looked at the floor for a moment before looking back at me, and there was a flicker of something there. "Fear? Guilt? I don't know why you're upset, but you're jumping to conclusions," she said, her voice stiff. "There's nothing going on." I felt a cold rush of frustration. "Then why does it feel like you're hiding something? Why does it feel like you're lying to me?" Her expression hardened, and I saw a flash of defensiveness. "I'm not hiding anything," she said, voice low. "You're overreacting." I stared at her, feeling a gulf between us opening wider with every word. If there's nothing going on, then why is this happening? Why does it feel like I don't know you anymore? She took a deep breath, and the distance between us became even more palpable. "I'm not hiding anything," she repeated, but there was a finality in her tone that sent a chill down my spine. I wanted to believe her. I really did, but something inside me just didn't. I could feel the air in the kitchen grow heavy, like the weight of the words we hadn't said was pressing down on us both. Sarah stood there, arms crossed, eyes a little too steady, as if she were holding something back. Her lips were pressed into a thin line, and for the first time in a long time, I could see the walls rising between us. She wasn't hiding anything, she had said, but everything about her posture, her words, felt like a carefully constructed lie. I had always prided myself on knowing Sarah, on reading her like an open book, but today the pages seemed to be missing, torn out. I didn't recognize her. I was standing in a room with a stranger. I glanced at the counter, at her phone lying just where I had left it, still unlocked, still open. The messages were sitting there, like an accusation, waiting for me to look, to confront her. I hadn't even touched the phone since I put it down. I didn't need to. I already knew what I'd seen. But in that moment, I found myself drawn to it again, as if it held the key to everything I was missing. I swallowed hard, trying to steady my voice. "I didn't mean to accuse you, but something's not right, Sarah. You're acting different, and I can't keep pretending I don't feel it." She stiffened at my words, but didn't respond right away. I could see her hands trembling slightly at her sides, like she was fighting the urge to react. I waited for her to speak, for her to say something that would clear the air, something that would make it all okay again. But when she finally opened her mouth, it wasn't what I expected. "I think you should leave," she said, her voice quiet but firm. I blinked, my mind struggling to process what she'd just said. "What?" I said, barely able to form a coherent thought. "Sarah, I need some space," she cut in, her voice sharper this time. "I think it's best if you leave, just for a little while." I stood there frozen, as if the floor had just dropped out from under me. "You want me to leave? After everything? After what I found?" She shook her head, but it wasn't in denial. It was more like she was shutting down. "I don't want to do this right now. I just need some time." Her words felt like a slap. I had always been there for her, always, through the good, the bad, everything. And now she was telling me to leave, to walk away. I couldn't make sense of it. How had we gotten here? Is there someone else? The question slipped out before I could stop it, the words sharp with the raw edge of my own desperation. Sarah's face went pale. I saw her eyes flicker briefly to the door and then back to me, but she didn't answer. That was all the answer I needed. She didn't say it, but the silence between us spoke volumes. My heart felt like it had been hollowed out, a sudden, aching emptiness spreading through my chest. I hadn't imagined it. I hadn't been wrong. There was someone else. I wanted to scream, to demand answers, but I couldn't bring myself to do it. Instead, I just stood there, staring at her, waiting for her to say something, anything that would make this feel less real. But she didn't. "I need you to go," she repeated, her voice barely above a whisper now. And in that moment, I knew she meant it. This wasn't just some temporary argument. This was something deeper, something permanent. My wife, the woman I had trusted, the woman I had loved for years, was asking me to leave. I turned toward the door, my mind reeling, my body moving on its own, as if I were in a daze. As I passed the hallway, I caught a glimpse of the small glass jar Sarah kept on the mantel. The jar with the flowers we'd picked together years ago, our first anniversary. I felt like I was walking out of my life, out of the home I'd shared with her, and into something I didn't recognize. I couldn't look at her again. I couldn't face the truth. When I stepped out the door, I didn't even know where I was going. I just needed to get away. The air outside was cool against my skin, but it did nothing to calm the storm inside my chest. My heart was pounding, my mind racing, but all I could focus on was the last thing Sarah had said. I need some space. And what the hell did that mean? I didn't know how long I'd been walking, but eventually my feet stopped at a park bench. I sat there, staring at the ground, as my mind tried to make sense of everything that had happened. The messages, the photo, the hair tie, everything felt like a puzzle I couldn't solve. Who was Eli, and what did he mean to Sarah? I sat on that bench for what felt like hours, my mind too clouded with questions to think straight. The world around me seemed to move on as usual, people walking by, the occasional car passing, but I couldn't make sense of any of it. Everything felt distorted, like I was seeing through a fog. What had just happened? Sarah asking me to leave, was that her way of ending things? Or was it a moment of panic, an impulse born from the tension between us? I couldn't help but replay the last few months in my mind. Were there signs I'd missed? Small moments when things felt off, but I had ignored them, chalked them up to stress or routine. I tried to remember everything, her mood swings, the late nights, the long hours she'd been putting in at work, but those were things I had passed off as normal. And then Eli. I pulled my phone out of my pocket, the screen lighting up in front of me. The first thing I saw was a message from Sarah, the one I had missed when I was still at the house. We need to talk when you get back. It was simple, too simple. A part of me wanted to respond, to ask her what she meant, but another part of me, an instinct I couldn't shake, told me not to, not yet, not until I had a clearer picture. I opened my messages to Eli. It felt like an invasion what I was doing, but I needed to know. I scrolled through the thread again, looking for something I had missed. There it was again, the message from last night. I miss you already. Can't wait to see you again. I stared at it for a moment, trying to figure out how to process it. Was this an affair? Or was it something else? Was she falling for him? Was this about something more than just physical attraction? Suddenly, I remembered something Sarah had said a while back. I'm just trying to keep my distance, she had told me one night. I hadn't thought much of it at the time. It seemed like a passing remark, but now, with everything that was happening, I wondered if she'd been talking about more than just space in our relationship. I opened the photo of her and Eli. They were smiling, standing close together, his arm around her. But there was something in the way they looked at each other, something that sent a shiver down my spine. There was a level of intimacy there, a shared connection that I hadn't seen before. The realization hit me hard. She had been keeping secrets, big ones. My hands trembled as I typed out a message to Eli, something simple but pointed. What's going on between you and Sarah? I hit send before I could second-guess myself. It didn't take long for a response to pop up. We need to talk too. I stared at the message for a long time, feeling my stomach drop. I hadn't expected him to respond. I had half expected him to ignore me, or to be defensive, or even to deny everything. But this felt like a crack in the facade. I didn't know if I was ready for what was coming, but I had asked the question, and now there was no turning back. I tried to calm myself, but the waiting, just the thought of what Eli might say, was unbearable. I needed answers. I needed the truth. I stood up from the bench, my legs shaky beneath me. I didn't even know where I was going, but I knew I couldn't sit there anymore. I walked aimlessly, letting my feet carry me, my thoughts a whirlwind. I checked my phone again. There was a new message from Eli. Meet me at the bakery. I'll be there at 4. We need to talk about Sarah. The bakery. My heart skipped. It didn't make sense, but then again, nothing made sense anymore. Why would he want to meet me there? What did he mean? I stared at the message, the weight of the moment pressing in on me. I wasn't sure what I expected, but I knew I had to go. I had to find out what this was. The world around me was silent, my mind racing. But when the time came to face him, to hear the truth about what had been happening right under my nose, I didn't know if I was ready. But I had no choice. The bakery was only a few blocks away, but it felt like miles. My mind was buzzing, every step heavier than the last. By the time I reached the corner, I could already see the sign. Luca's Bakery, a place Sarah and I had frequented for years. It had a charm to it, with its vintage-style windows and the soft, warm glow spilling out onto the sidewalk. I always associated it with comfort, with the early mornings when Sarah and I would grab coffee and pastries before starting our day. It was our place. But today, it felt different. Today, it felt like the scene of some quiet betrayal. I pushed open the door, the bell above it jingling as I stepped inside. The scent of fresh bread, cinnamon, and sugar filled the air. There was something almost ironic about it, the way the warmth of the bakery contrasted with the chill inside me. I scanned the room, my eyes darting over the familiar shelves filled with golden croissants and sugar-dusted pastries. The place was mostly empty, save for a few patrons quietly enjoying their coffee at the tables. But at the back, behind the counter, I saw him. Eli. He was leaning against the counter, looking relaxed, almost too calm. He was watching me with an expression I couldn't read, a small, unreadable smile tugging at the corner of his lips. My stomach twisted, but I didn't break my gaze. I needed to know what was going on. I walked up to the counter slowly, my heart hammering in my chest. Eli didn't say anything at first. He just watched me approach, his hands resting casually on the counter. The faint scent of flour and yeast hung in the air, mixing with the tension between us. Finally, he spoke. "You're here." I nodded. "I'm here. So, what's going on?" Eli gave me a tight-lipped smile. It wasn't warm, but it wasn't aggressive either. It was the smile of someone who knew more than they were letting on, and that irritated me more than anything else. "You're probably wondering why I asked you to come here," he said, his voice low but clear. "I didn't want to meet you at your place. I didn't think it was the right setting." "Right setting for what?" I shot back, frustration creeping into my voice. "What's going on with Sarah? Why does she—" I paused, my throat tightening. "Why does she keep hiding things from me?" Eli's smile flickered for a brief moment before he cleared his throat. "It's not as simple as you think." I leaned forward, my fists tightening on the edge of the counter. "Then make it simple, Eli. I don't want cryptic answers. I want the truth." He glanced around almost nervously, as if checking to make sure no one was listening. His eyes flicked back to mine. "Sarah and we've been seeing each other for a while now." I felt the world tilt like the ground had been pulled out from under me. My breath caught in my throat. I tried to process his words, but they felt like they weren't even mine. This couldn't be happening. "What?" The word came out as a whisper, barely audible, but the weight of it hung in the air. "No, that's not possible. You, Sarah." I couldn't finish. It didn't make sense. Eli's face softened, but there was a coldness behind his eyes that made my stomach churn. "She wasn't happy with you, man. I think she tried, but she's been unhappy for a long time." I recoiled at his words, feeling like I'd been punched in the gut. "You think she's been unhappy? Do you even know what you're talking about?" Eli raised his hands in mock surrender, his tone calm but firm. "Look, I didn't mean to be the guy to break this to you, but I'm not the one hiding it. She's been living with this for months, trying to figure out how to leave you, but she couldn't bring herself to do it." I stared at him, the words spinning in my head, but they didn't make sense. Sarah wasn't happy? She had always seemed happy, hadn't she? Had I missed something? Was I so blind to the cracks in our relationship that they had widened without me noticing? She never said anything," I muttered, almost to myself. "She never said she wasn't happy. She didn't—" "Because she didn't want to hurt you," Eli interrupted, his voice softening for the first time. "But she had to make a choice, and she chose me." I felt like the floor had dropped out from under me. I wasn't sure what was worse, hearing it from Eli or realizing that Sarah had made the decision without ever giving me a chance to understand what was happening. I didn't know how to respond. I just stared at him, the reality of what he was saying sinking in, slowly, painfully. "What now?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Eli stood up straighter, pushing his hands into the pockets of his apron. "Now you go back to your life, and Sarah and we figure out what comes next." His words felt final, like an unspoken agreement between them, like they had already planned what would happen next. I wanted to scream, to punch something, to ask why she had betrayed me like this. But all I could do was stand there, motionless, feeling like a fool. Eli stepped back, his eyes flickering to the door. "She's waiting for you to come home," he said quietly, almost like an afterthought. "You should go talk to her. She wants to explain." I stood frozen, unsure of what to do next. The weight of his words felt unbearable. There was no more doubt now. There was no more question. Sarah had betrayed me. I just didn't know how or why. But I was about to find out. I don't remember walking back, but somehow I found myself standing in front of our door. Every step had felt heavier than the last, as if my body was moving on autopilot. The pain inside me was sharp, overwhelming. I wanted answers, but I didn't know what I'd find when I walked through that door. I hesitated, hand on the doorknob. What was I even expecting? Sarah waiting with an apology, an explanation, or maybe just the truth. I pushed the door open. Sarah was sitting on the couch in the living room. She looked up when I entered, and for a moment her expression flickered, a mix of guilt and nervousness. She offered a weak smile, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Hey," she said, her voice uncertain. I stood still, taking in the sight of her, trying to reconcile the woman I thought I knew with the one who had betrayed me. The woman sitting there didn't feel like my wife, not anymore. Why? The word came out almost like a whisper, but it was all I could manage. She looked down at her hands, her fingers fidgeting. I didn't know how to tell you, she said quietly. I didn't want to hurt you. The weight of her words hit me harder than I expected. She didn't want to hurt me. I took a deep breath, forcing my voice steady. How long, Sarah? She didn't meet my eyes. A few months, since the summer. A few months, I repeated, trying to wrap my head around it. And you couldn't tell me? You couldn't talk to me? She looked up at me then, her eyes filled with guilt. I didn't know how to fix it. I didn't know what to say. And then Eli. He was there when I needed someone. He understood me. My chest tightened. Eli. The man she had chosen over me. My mind reeled. She had been slipping away for months and I hadn't seen it. I hadn't seen her unhappiness. Didn't want to hurt me, I echoed bitterly. You hurt me more than you know. I never meant for it to go this far, she whispered. I'm sorry. I don't know how to fix it. I shook my head, my throat tightening. So, you just let it happen. You let this thing with him grow, and you never said anything. I was scared, she admitted, tears beginning to well in her eyes. I didn't want to lose you, but I felt so alone. And when Eli... Enough, I cut in, my voice a little louder than I intended. You chose him, Sarah. You didn't give me a chance to fix anything. Her tears flowed freely now. She reached for me, but I stepped back. I can't, I said quietly, my voice breaking. I can't forgive you for this, not after everything. Her face crumpled, her shoulders shaking with silent sobs. I stood there, feeling a cold distance between us that I didn't know how to bridge. I'm sorry, she sobbed again. I really am. I don't want to lose you. I felt numb, disconnected. I don't know what to do anymore, I said, my voice hoarse. I don't know if I can trust you again. I turned to leave, but something stopped me. I glanced back one last time, not knowing what to say, how to fix this. I don't know what happens now, I whispered. But I can't. Stay. I walked out the door without looking back. The air outside felt cool against my skin, but it didn't calm the storm inside me. I had walked out. I had made the decision to leave, but now, standing on the sidewalk, I wasn't sure what came next. The city around me was still alive, bustling, indifferent to the wreckage I was carrying with me. The world was moving forward, but I was stuck, caught in the swirl of my own thoughts. I couldn't remember the last time I felt this lost. Everything had been so clear just a few days ago. Sarah and I, our life together, the future we'd talked about. It had all been so real, so certain. And now it felt like I was standing on the edge of something, about to fall, but not knowing where I'd land. I didn't want to go back to the apartment. I didn't want to be near Sarah, not after what had just happened. So I walked. I didn't have a destination in mind. My feet moved automatically, taking me through streets I knew like the back of my hand, but felt completely foreign now. My head was spinning. Eli's face kept flashing in my mind, his smug, almost bored expression in the bakery, like he had all the answers, like he knew everything, while I was left to piece together a shattered reality. I pulled out my phone, checking for messages. There was nothing from Sarah, nothing from anyone. I hadn't told anyone where I was going, hadn't called my family or friends. I hadn't spoken to anyone since this all started. I didn't want to. I didn't want to explain. Not yet. I found myself standing in front of a park. The trees were starting to show the first signs of autumn, their leaves just beginning to turn. I hadn't been here in ages. It used to be a place Sarah and I went to when we wanted to clear our heads, when we needed to talk without distractions. But now, standing here alone, it felt like a cruel reminder of what I had lost. I sat down on a bench, burying my face in my hands. My thoughts kept circling back to Sarah, the woman I thought I knew, the woman who had stood by my side through everything, and now I had to face the truth. She had chosen someone else. She had let me go without a word, without even trying to fix what was broken. A part of me wanted to call her, to beg for an explanation, to understand why this was happening. But I knew deep down that it wouldn't change anything. The betrayal was too deep, too raw. I couldn't keep pretending everything was fine, not when the foundation of our marriage had crumbled beneath me. I checked the time. It was getting late. I hadn't realized how long I had been sitting there. The park was quieter now, the fading light casting long shadows across the path. I should have gone back to the apartment. I should have faced Sarah again, tried to talk, to resolve this somehow. But I couldn't. Not yet. I stood up, stretching my stiff legs. The decision felt like a weight I couldn't carry anymore. I had to do something. I couldn't just stay stuck in this limbo. I needed to take control of the situation, to make a choice for myself instead of waiting for Sarah to fix it. I pulled out my phone again, this time dialing a number I hadn't called in months. My friend, Mike. He'd been there for me through everything. He would listen. Maybe he'd have answers. Maybe he'd at least help me figure out what to do next. It rang twice before he picked up. "Hey, man," he answered, his voice warm as if nothing was wrong. "Mike," I said, my voice tight. "I need to talk." There was a pause on the other end. "Of course," he said. "What's going on?" I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of everything I'd been holding in for hours. "It's Sarah. She's been seeing someone else. I found out today." Mike didn't say anything at first. I could hear him shift, his own breath hitching slightly. "Damn, man," he said softly. "I'm sorry. What are you going to do?" I didn't have an answer for him. I just stood there, staring out at the empty park, feeling more lost than ever. "I don't know," I said. "I don't know what I'm supposed to do now." Mike sighed, his voice steady. "Take it one step at a time. You don't have to have all the answers right now. You just need to take care of yourself. If you want, I can come meet you. We can talk or just hang out. Take your mind off things." I closed my eyes for a moment, letting his words sink in. I didn't want to be alone right now, not with everything weighing on me. "Yeah," I said finally. "I'd like that." Showed up about an hour later, as promised. I hadn't said much on the phone, just that I needed to talk, but he got it. He always did. We met at a quiet bar nearby, the kind of place where you could sit for hours and just think. Mike took the seat across from me, his eyes studying me like he was waiting for me to open up. I hadn't really looked at myself in the mirror, but I knew the guy sitting here now didn't look like the same man who'd walked out of Sarah's life earlier that day. I felt different, broken. "So, what happened?" Mike asked, taking a sip of his beer, keeping his tone casual but attentive. I ran a hand through my hair, trying to collect my thoughts. "She's been seeing someone else, Eli, for months. I found out today." I let the words hang in the air. Mike's eyes darkened. "Man, I'm sorry. So, she told you?" I shook my head. "No, he did. I ran into him at the bakery. Just like that, he tells me they've been together for months, that Sarah wasn't happy with me." I sighed, feeling the weight of it all. It's like I was blind to everything. Mike paused, clearly processing. "You didn't see any signs?" I took a deep breath. "I thought she was just stressed with work, you know? We'd both been busy. She was quiet sometimes, but I figured that was normal. I never imagined this." Mike's voice was steady but full of sympathy. "You're not responsible for what she did, man. People change, but they don't always let you in on it." "I know," I muttered, staring into my drink. "But how long was she checking out? She never gave me a chance to fix it. Never said anything. And then this guy, Eli, he's the one who gets the truth." Mike's face softened, but his tone remained firm. "It's not your fault, man. You couldn't fix something if you didn't even know it was broken. She shut you out, and now she's paying for that. Don't let her make you feel like you failed." I nodded slowly, feeling the truth of his words settle in. I know I didn't fail, but it's hard to not feel like I missed something. She chose him. She didn't even try to talk to me. Mike leaned in a little, his eyes steady. "And you don't need to fix it anymore. She made her choice, and now it's time for you to focus on yourself." I took a long drink, letting the burn of alcohol ground me in the moment. I don't know where to go from here. I don't know what to do tomorrow. I feel lost. Mike gave me a half smile, trying to lighten the mood. "One step at a time, buddy. You don't need all the answers right now. Just figure out what's next for you. When you're ready to talk to her again, you will. But right now, take care of you." I exhaled, the weight on my chest slightly lifting. "Thanks, Mike. I don't know what I'd do without you." He shrugged. "That's what friends are for. You're not alone in this." For the first time in hours, I allowed myself to breathe, to think about what I needed. Maybe I didn't have all the answers, but I had time. And I wasn't facing this alone. The next few days passed in a blur. I spent most of them in a haze, moving between my apartment and the park, barely sleeping, barely eating. My mind kept returning to Sarah, to the betrayal that felt like it was lodged deep in my chest. But the more I tried to process it, the more it felt like trying to hold water in my hands. It kept slipping through my fingers. I hadn't spoken to her since that night. There were moments when I wanted to reach out, when I wanted answers, but I couldn't bring myself to do it. I wasn't ready to hear her excuses, to hear the reasons why she chose him. And I wasn't sure I ever would be. Mike kept checking in on me, giving me space but making sure I wasn't sinking too deep. His presence was a lifeline in the chaos, a reminder that there were still people in my corner. The thought of going back to the apartment, facing Sarah again, gnawed at me. But then, a part of me knew I couldn't keep running from this. I had to face it, for better or worse. It wasn't just about Sarah anymore. It was about me, about deciding what came next in my life. And so one evening, I found myself standing in front of the door to our apartment once more. The decision had been made, whether I was ready or not. I needed closure. I needed to know if there was any possibility of salvaging what was left, or if it was time to let go completely. I knocked, softly. It took a few moments, but then the door opened, and there she was, Sarah. Her eyes were red, like she'd been crying, but there was something else too, an exhaustion in her face that mirrored my own. She looked at me for a long moment, then stepped aside without saying anything. I didn't know if she expected me to come in, or if she was waiting for me to leave, but I stepped inside. The silence between us was thick, oppressive. I could feel the weight of everything we hadn't said, everything that had happened between us. Finally, Sarah spoke. "I didn't think you'd come back." I swallowed hard, trying to find the words. "I needed to talk to you, to understand what happened." She nodded, but there was no anger in her, no defensiveness, just sadness. "I didn't want to hurt you," she said softly. "I never meant for any of this to happen." I couldn't meet her eyes, but it did. She looked away, like she couldn't bear to see the pain in my face. "I thought I was doing the right thing. I thought I was protecting you by keeping everything to myself. But I was wrong. I should have told you. I should have been honest." I felt the anger rise, but I fought it down. What good would it do now? "You should have told me, but you didn't. You let it go on for months. You let him get close to you, and you never gave me a chance to fix anything." Her face crumpled. "I was scared. I didn't know how to talk to you about it. I didn't know how to fix what was broken." I wanted to scream, to yell at her for all the time we'd lost, for everything that could have been different if she had just opened up to me. But I didn't. I just stood there, feeling more lost than ever. "Do you love him?" I asked, the questions slipping out before I could stop it. Sarah took a long breath, then met my eyes. I do. I do love him. But that doesn't mean I don't love you too." The words stung, but I couldn't look away. "You can't love both of us. You can't have both." She shook her head, tears welling up again. "I don't know what I want anymore. I don't know how to fix this." I stood there for what felt like an eternity, the weight of everything bearing down on me. My heart ached. I didn't know how to fix this either. But I knew one thing. I couldn't keep fighting for something that wasn't there anymore. I took a deep breath, looking at her one last time. "I think it's time for both of us to move on." She nodded, tears streaming down her face. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." I didn't say anything more. There was nothing left to say. I walked out the door, leaving behind everything that once was. It was the hardest thing I'd ever done, but it felt like the right thing. As I stepped into the hallway, I felt a strange sense of relief mixed with the emptiness. I didn't know what the future held, but for the first time in a long time, I was free. And maybe that was enough for now.